Okay, let's be honest. When you think of India's economic powerhouses, what states pop into your head? For a long time, I bet Bihar wasn't one of them. Well, it turns out the data is telling a completely different and, frankly, pretty shocking story. So let's dig into the numbers and see what's really going on with one of India's most surprising economic turnarounds. All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to look at just how fast Bihar's economy is moving. Then we'll dive into why it's changing so much. We'll also see what this all means for the average person's paycheck, take a hard look at who might be getting left behind, and finally peek into what the future might hold. Okay, let's jump right into the big headline here. For the past few years, Bihar's economy has been on an absolute tear. And I mean, it's not just growing, it's consistently growing faster than the entire country. And you can see it plain as day. For 3 straight years, Bihar's economic growth has just been pulling away from India's national average. We're talking 2022, 2023, and all the way through the estimates for 2025. This isn't some one-time fluke, it's a real consistent pattern of just outperformance. Now let's zoom in on the latest numbers, because this is where it gets really wild. For 2024-25, we're looking at Bihar's economy growing by a whopping 13.1%. Compare that to the national average of 9.8%. That difference of more than 3 percentage points, that's a massive deal. It's a huge lead. And you might be thinking, okay, but what about inflation? Well, even when we account for that, when we look at real growth, the story is exactly the same. Bihar is clocking in at 8.6%, which is still way ahead of India's 6.5%. So the takeaway here is crystal clear. No matter how you look at it, Bihar is right up there as one of the fastest growing states in the entire country. So that's the what. Now for the really interesting part, the how. I mean, where is all this growth coming from? Well, the answer isn't simple. It's actually a deep, fundamental shift in the very DNA of the state's economy. Just take a look at this. You can see how the economic makeup has transformed. Back in 2020, the economy was heavily reliant on agriculture. Fast forward to today, and you can see that the slice of the pie for agriculture has gotten smaller, while the part representing industry, things like manufacturing and construction, has gotten noticeably bigger. And if we put some hard numbers on that, it's pretty stunning. The secondary sector's share of the economy has leaped from about 21% to almost 27%. In just 4 years. That is an incredibly fast shift. It's a clear sign that Bihar is moving towards a more industrial-based economy. And here's the real engine room of this whole transformation. That secondary sector isn't just taking up a bigger piece of the pie, it's also the fastest growing piece, expanding by over 11%. This is where the action is. This is where the momentum is coming from. It's all being powered by construction and manufacturing. Okay, so these big picture numbers are great, right? But what does all this economic growth actually mean for the average person living in Bihar? Let's bring it down from the 30,000-foot view to the kitchen table and talk about what's happening with people's incomes. And the trend here is just, wow, it's a straight line up. In just 4 short years, the average income has jumped from about 46,000 rupees to over 76,000. That's a huge bump. It means more money in people's pockets, more purchasing power, and that's a change you can actually feel. Let's just let that number sink in for a moment. 76,490 rupees. That's not just a statistic. It's the tangible result of all this growth we've been talking about. It's a number that represents real, meaningful change in people's day-to-day lives. But, and this is a really important but, we need some perspective here. While the progress is absolutely real, there's still a long road ahead. Bihar's per capita income is still well below the national average, which is closer to 1.9 lakh rupees. So yes, that gap is shrinking, but it's still very, very wide. And that brings us to a much trickier part of this whole story. Is this wave of prosperity lifting everyone up equally? Or is it creating a kind of tale of two Bihars right inside the state? So the real question is, does your experience of this economic boom totally depend on your zip code? Well, when you look at the data from different districts, the answer seems to be a loud and clear yes. I mean, just look at the top performing districts. You've got the capital, Patna, where the per capita income is over 2.4 lakh rupees. Let that sink in. That's not just good for Bihar, that's actually higher than the national average. And you've got other places like Begusarai and Munger that are also doing really well, crossing that 1 lakh rupee milestone. But then you see the other side of the coin, and it is a stark contrast. The average income in the richest district, Patna, is more than 10 times what it is in the poorest district, Shior. That is a massive, massive gap. It shows that while this is a high-growth story, it is definitely not a story of even growth across the board. So where does Bihar go from here? Well, despite this huge challenge of inequality, the official word from the Bihar Economic Survey is incredibly optimistic. They believe the state is on track to keep up this amazing pace. And this quote from the survey really sums it all up. They're saying the state is on a high-growth trajectory, backed by things like a stable economy, a more diverse range of industries, and more investment coming in. Basically, they're saying this isn't just luck, it's by design. And these are the key things they're banking on to keep the momentum going. It's a whole strategy. We're talking about keeping the economy stable, continuing to diversify away from just agriculture, and attracting more investment. But it's also about the people, developing skills, creating jobs, and building the roads and power grids you need for a modern economy. So look, there is absolutely no doubt that the story of Bihar's economy is changing, and changing fast. It's a story of incredible speed and deep structural transformation. But the big question, the one that really matters for the future, is this. How can the state take all this amazing momentum and make sure that its next chapter isn't just about high growth, but about growth that reaches everyone?